Hey everybody, it is Jim McGuinn for Teenage Kicks here on The Current, and this week, sadly, we're talking about Ric Ocasek, the leader of the Cars, who passed away recently at the age of 75, and he'd had a really fascinating life, it seems, from all accounts, looking at it from the outside in. I mean, he grew up in Baltimore, he moved to Cleveland as a teen. That's where he ran into Benjamin Orr. Now, Benjamin Orr and Ric Ocasek formed a duo. They had a folk rock record in the early 70s after they relocated to Boston. That didn't really succeed for them, but they were on that scene. They were hanging out with people like Jonathan Richman. They were very influenced by bands like the Velvet Underground and the art rock of somebody like a Roxy Music when they came up with the idea of the Cars in the mid-1970s. They had a demo that got played heavily on the big Boston radio station of the late 70s called WBCN. That led to a record deal. And then they were in the studio recording with Roy Thomas Baker, who'd worked on all the Queen records in the 70s. And that combination of their influences, Ric's songs, he was the primary songwriter, he and Benjamin kind of traded off on the lead vocals, combined to create that sound that became the Cars. And it was this weird amalgamation of a little bit of punk rock, a little bit of art rock, a little bit of like a detached irony in his vocal deliveries. And it really became the big bang that was the new wave, the sound that kind of took off after punk in the late 1970s in America and the UK. I'd say the Cars and the Police and Blondie maybe being some of the leading bands that exemplified that sound. So after the Cars had huge hits, their biggest hit came out in the 1980s with the Heartbeat City record, which had Drive on it. They kind of became out of favor, out of time, and they eventually broke up in the late 80s. Now, Ocasek went on to become a record producer. He produced Weezer's Blue album and also the Green album. He produced Guided by Voices, maybe their best sounding record. He worked with Nada Surf. He worked with Motion City Soundtrack from the Twin Cities as well, and a bunch of other acts throughout his later career. He did A&R for labels, and he's also somewhat famously known as being a friend of P, as in Paulina Porsakova, the supermodel who starred in one of the Cars videos, and that's where they met, and they ended up marrying and having a long life together with a couple of kids before they separated just a few years ago. Now, the Cars made the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2018, and what the world didn't know is that he was actually, at that time, suffering from some health issues, and sadly, he passed away. It seems still a shock to everybody when we had the news. Also, one thing that's kind of interesting is that there was a big dispute over, was he 70 or was he 75? He was 75, and professionally, when the Cars started, that would have put him at about 35 years old, which is kind of old to start a pop rock band in the late 1970s, which is why they kind of faked his age for a long time, and many people just believed, oh no, he's 70, but turns out he actually was 75 years old. A great artist, a great producer, songwriter, and just kind of the epitome of sort of a coolness that Ric Ocasek had. We celebrate his music on Teenage Kicks. Okay, so for our song today on the ukulele, we're going to try a song from the first album, It's Just What I Needed, which has the same chords in the chorus as Sweet Jane by the Velvet Underground. And the Cars were famous for doing a technique called palm muting. So if you normally hit a chord, you hear how it rings out. Palm muting, you rest your palm on the strings and you bang on it and they're kind of dampened. So you get a sound that's a little more percussive and it sounds more like this. Well, I don't mind you coming here and wasting all my time. 'Cause when you're standing oh so near, I kinda lose my mind, yeah. It's not the perfume that you wear, it's not the ribbons in your hair. Well, I don't mind you coming here and wasting all my time. That's how it goes. That's the first verse of the Cars, Just What I Needed here on Teenage Kicks.